This past weekend, David Brody sat down with Paul Ryan. The vice presidential candidate said that the Obama administration's actions toward Israel border on contempt. Let's take a look at that exclusive interview.
The minute Paul Ryan came onto the scene, conservatives couldn't get enough of him, heaping praise on their fresh 42-year-old idea man. All the energy and rave reviews, however, have not translated into a lead in the polls against President Obama, at least not yet. Why do you think he's still leading in the polls at this point?
Well, two things. We're taking on an incumbent president. We're the challengers. He's the incumbent. He has all the benefits of incumbency of the bully pulpit. Number two, he just spent the last 3 or 4 months trashing Mitt Romney. What he's trying to do is make Mitt Romney an unacceptable alternative because he has no record to run on.
And it's Obama's record that Ryan and Romney call into question. One example, foreign policy. They call him an apologizer-in-chief who hasn't been a good friend to Israel. Even this week, Obama said he wouldn't have time to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Of all times, when we need to show very little daylight, if any, between our relationship with Israel, it's now. And so I think this fraying relationship with Israel, bordering on contempt, is the worst possible thing we should be doing at this time.
As for the recent chaos in the Mideast, Ryan says it's time to rethink the money the United States sends to those countries. Would a Romney-Ryan administration take a serious look at cutting off all aid?
Yeah, you have to reassess all these things. It's too early. First of all, what you don't do is you don't knee-jerk. You don't have knee-jerk reactions. But you clearly assess these things.
We have a plan to get our economy back on track.
Ryan's main love is assessing numbers. His bread and butter is the economy. As House Budget Chairman, his plan to restructure Medicare and take serious steps to rein in spending has been a flashpoint during this presidential race. Liberals see potential cuts to federal programs as mean-spirited. Ryan maintains it's morally right to be fiscally responsible and relies on his conservative Catholic views to shape public policy.
And the notion that you can divorce these principles, these matters of faith, between private life and public life, that doesn't jive with the thinking of a Catholic.
The Catholic Ryan is also insulted with the Obama administration's decision that forced Catholic institutions to violate their conscience by paying for contraception services in their health care plans for employees. Many of those organizations are now suing the government.
Look, under a Romney administration, this is gone. We will not do this.
Ryan is also committed to calling out the Federal Reserve. This week, the Fed announced a third attempt to help stimulate the weak economy by pumping another $40 billion into it.
I think in the long run it will do more harm than good. But what this is it's the Federal Reserve and the monetary policy trying to bail out the fact that we have terrible leadership on fiscal policy from President Obama.
If you know Paul Ryan's history, then his unwavering approach to issues, or the fact that he's been successful in life, shouldn't be too surprising. At age 16, he had a life-changing experience. That's when young Paul discovered his father dead at home.
And my dad's secretary called to say, where is he? He's got clients in his office. He was a small-town lawyer. And I went to wake him up, and he was dead. He had been dead for some time. He died of a heart attack in the middle of the night. That's something that no person should ever have to go through.
He calls it a punch in the gut, and it led to some soul-searching.
I became that much stronger in my convictions, in my faith. And it was one of those sort of moments in a person's life that just was a pivotal moment, a trajectory-making moment. And I decided I'm gonna take life on and make it count because it is precious and short.
He sure is making the most of his life so far, and nobody, not even Ryan himself, knows exactly how the story will eventually end. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Well, you can see more of David's interview with Paul Ryan and other newsmakers on The Brody File. It airs every Friday on the ABC Family Channel at 9:30 a.m. And by the way, speaking of the news, Susan Rice is the UN ambassador for the Obama administration, said all the trouble that is taking place in the Middle East, all the riots, were caused by an 11-minute video that went on YouTube. It has nothing to do with Obama policies, has nothing to do with American posture in the world, and it's much like Salman Rushdie. Of course, Salman Rushdie was the subject of a fatwa issued where all Muslims were told to kill him. But nevertheless, a video that hardly any Muslim, probably no Muslim ever saw, is responsible for all of the violence against all the embassies. How about that for spin? Well, Lee Webb has more of our top stories from the CBN newsroom. Lee.
Well, Pat, we want to go back to the issue of Israel right now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took to the American airwaves Sunday, appealing directly to U.S. voters to elect a president willing to draw a red line with Iran. The Obama administration says it will do what it takes to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. But Netanyahu told NBC's Meet the Press it takes more than words.
And for me, the issue is, as the prime minister of a country that is threatened with annihilation by a regime that is racing, a brutal regime in Tehran that is racing to develop nuclear bombs for that end. Obviously, we cannot delegate the job of stopping Iran, if all else fails, to someone else.
Netanyahu estimates Iran is about 6 months away from having enough enriched uranium to create a nuclear weapon. The unrest across the Muslim world has prompted the U.S. to evacuate Americans from its missions overseas. Tensions are especially high in Afghanistan, where 3 weekend attacks resulted in the deaths of 8 troops. Heather Sells has more.
In Afghanistan today, demonstrators took to the streets of Kabul, still protesting over an anti-Islam film produced in the U.S. And in Pakistan, police fired tear gas and water cannons on protesters who broke through a barricade as they headed to the U.S. consulate.
The president has been very clear the protection of American personnel and facilities is and will remain our top priority.
American troops in Afghanistan are on edge after at least one Afghan police officer turned his gun on NATO troops at a remote checkpoint on Sunday, killing 4 American service members. That followed a Taliban attack on a coalition base that many thought was the safest in the country. The attackers wore American uniforms.
This was a very deliberate, well-planned, well-executed attack by the Taliban that created chaos and mayhem on a base that should have been more secure, and this should not have happened.
And there's now debate over whether last week's attack in Libya was planned. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations says the September 11th attack on the American consulate there was not premeditated, but escalated out of control.
As that unfolded, it seems to have been hijacked, let us say, by some individual clusters of extremists who came with heavier weapons. It then evolved from there.
That view sharply contradicts that of Libya's president.
The way these perpetrators acted, and they're choosing the specific date for this so-called demonstration. I think this leaves us with no doubt that this is pre-planned.
Most people don't bring rocket-propelled grenades and heavy weapons to a demonstration. That was an act of terror.
Heather Sells, CBN News.
So, Pat, the question is, who do you believe, Ambassador Rice or John McCain and the Libyan president on this issue?
I wouldn't believe Ambassador Rice if she said the sun was shining. But anyhow, Lee, the question we're facing, very frankly, is one of policy. I mean, this Afghanistan thing defeated the Brits, it's defeated the Russians, it's a quagmire. And the question is, are we going to play with it? Are we going to get out? Are we going to win? We can't play with war. You can't play with the precious lives of American soldiers. You can't do it. And right now we're playing with it. You know, we're saying, well, we're going to get out pretty soon, and we're not going to do a big surge. We've done one, but it was half what, or 2/3 what the generals asked for, and so forth. We've either got to go in with all guns blazing with a major effort to defeat the Taliban and to win, or we ought to get out. And my vote would be to get out. I think we've had enough of Afghanistan. The Russians had enough of it, and the Brits had enough of it, and I don't think we need it. And it's one of those things, a whole bunch of rocks and tribal feuds, and a very, very corrupt administration. They're as dirty as you can imagine. They're in the drug trade. They have a huge amount of opium coming out of Afghanistan, and we're sitting there complicit in it. I think it's time to to say goodbye, but I wouldn't risk one American soldier for that country. Lee?
It's been 1 year since the Obama administration began allowing homosexuals to serve openly in the military. The Pentagon says the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell has gone smoothly. Critics disagree. They say it's infringed on the rights of service members who have a moral objection to homosexuality. They say it's been disruptive, but many are afraid to speak up because of repercussions. Some members of Congress have spoken out against civil union ceremonies in the military at the military chapels in New Jersey and Florida because they violated the Defense of Marriage Act. New evidence confirms now that Planned Parenthood does not provide mammograms. This comes after Democrats accused Republicans of waging a so-called war on women for trying to cut Planned Parenthood's taxpayer funding. Liberals claim Planned Parenthood provides essential women's health care, including mammograms, but the Alliance Defending Freedom says that's simply not the case.
Any facility that wants to perform mammograms must be federally licensed. If you're not federally licensed and you perform a mammogram, you're subject to $10,000 a day fines. And so what we did was simply to ask the HHS, the Obama HHS, headed by Kathleen Sebelius, please provide us the copies of all the licenses that Planned Parenthood has around the country, and the response was there are none.
No Planned Parenthood affiliate in the nation has the certification to perform mammograms under federal law. Maddox says Planned Parenthood portrays itself as a full-service women's health provider to keep taxpayer money coming in, but he says the truth is it's simply the nation's largest abortion provider. Pat?
The American Center for Law and Justice, which you know CBN started and has been very closely aligned with, now has two major suits against Planned Parenthood, one in California, one in Texas. And they were based on whistleblower complaints that have come in. The fact that Planned Parenthood has triple billed the United States government for services it did not perform. And it's unbelievable fraud, unbelievable. And that case was rejected by a district court on appeal. It was, the district court was overturned by the Ninth Circuit. And it's going forward to discovery, and the discovery is absolutely shocking. What they're doing, the fraud, and they're hitting the federal government for close to $500 million a year. It's unbelievable. The numbers go up. It was 200 million, then 300, then 400, and I think now it's close to $500 million of taxpayer money that is going to Planned Parenthood. And I might add, President Obama said that he would be willing to shut the government down and if the restriction on Planned Parenthood continued in the negotiation. So that's how serious it is. But, Christy, it is fraudulent in the extreme, and those cases are going to be body blows to Planned Parenthood. We're talking about huge sums because on a whistleblower complaint, it's triple damages. I mean, it's huge.
I think what's so fascinating, Pat, is that there have been so many issues for so long. Yeah. When will something be done, and why is that support continuing to be there? I don't understand it.
Well, if you read some of the writings that have been put out by Margaret Sanger, we've talked on this program for many, many years about Margaret Sanger, who was really the founder of Planned Parenthood, and what she wanted to do. And she wanted to sterilize black people. She wanted to sterilize fundamental Christians. She wanted to sterilize Southern Europeans. And that was the origin. I mean, it was a sterilization campaign. And she enlisted Martin Luther King because she wanted an African-American spokesperson to go forward as the front so that they could bring people in and sterilize them. That's what she wanted. I mean, it was, she said it very clearly. She wrote one monogram. I urge you all to read it. It's called Breeding the Thoroughbred by Margaret Sanger. Breeding the Thoroughbred.
Occupy Wall Street rallies are taking place across the country to mark the one-year anniversary of those protests. About 300 people observing the anniversary marched in Manhattan this weekend. Police say at least a dozen were arrested. The movement largely died out because of disorganization and lack of clear demands. What started out as a protest against income inequality turned into a disconnected rant against everything wrong with the world. CBN's Superbook is marching against child violence in Costa Rica. The National Children's Hospital in that country organized the march as part of Children's Day. CBN's director for Latin America said the march goes hand in hand with the Superbook project. It aims to cultivate values and strengthen communication between parents and children. Every day in Costa Rica, at least 7 cases of domestic violence against children are reported. And you can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international.